VidDevo Bible, 7 minutes in the Word of God. Genesis chapter 1, verse 25. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Everything that we see whenever we read the Word of God seems to point to God, because the Word of God is about God. Whenever it's the Word of man, then it seems to point to man. When I read in Genesis chapter 1 of verse 24, or verse 25, and God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good, I know that God did it. God said it, God did it, God made it. You see a pattern here that oftentimes men and people tend to take for granted and make a mistake of. We change what God said, we take away from what God made, we forget what God has done, only because we don't just read it and accept it for what it says. What it says is very clear. What it says is very easy to be understood. It doesn't take a genius or a rocket scientist to know that God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and God made the cattle after their kind, and God made everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. What kind of question would you come up with after that? God made, period. I like that. God made the beasts of, according to Genesis chapter 1, verse 25, we know these things are true because God was there. God did it. God said it. God made it. God saw that it was good. I really enjoy that part, God adding and saying that he saw that it was good. It wasn't a question of he made it good and it went bad. It wasn't a question of anything about trying to rearrange what God did. It simply says that God saw that it was good. There is no interpretation required. There's no explanation necessary for us to understand that in Genesis chapter 1 of verse 25, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind. That's pretty simple for me. I don't have to question, doubt, or look at creation. I don't have to look at evolution. I can look at Genesis chapter 1 of verse 25 and say, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind. I can question if I want to, but why would I? When God made the cattle after their kind and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. If God did it, why would we wonder about it? I'm not big enough to be God. I don't take things away from what God has said. I don't doubt about what God has done. I accept what God gives to me and what God speaks to me and what God tells me he has done. And because God has spoken to us in his word and that God is the one that's in charge, then I tend to believe that what God has said, God has done. What God has revealed, God is giving to us so we would understand. Because if God made all these things, I think he's big enough, I think he's smart enough, I think he's wise enough to handle everything. Because in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 25, it says, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. I can tell that to anyone I want to, whether a scientist, a rocket scientist, a rock star, a child, a baby, intellect, a philosopher, apologeticist, a creationist, an evolutionist, and I can say very clearly, very succinctly, very distinctly that this is what God has said. What man may debate, what man may have done, what man may change, what man may interpret, what man may rearrange, what man may take words out of and add to or try to explain thereof of God, I don't know. I don't think that man is God. No offense, but I don't see it that way. According to Genesis chapter 1 of verse 25, and God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. I know when man tries to make good, he comes up with not so good. When God makes good, it's a fact, jack, so to speak, as they steal that from some duck place or whatever, but they stole from someone else. But the point of it being simply this. There is no question, there is no doubt, there is no uncertainty. The clarity with which God is stating the reality of creation is such that we don't need creationists. We don't need an argument. We don't need a debate. It's simply making the statement and reading it and saying, hey, you may believe in evolution, but this is what God said in Genesis 1:25. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Well, what about evolution? Well, the answer to evolution is simple. In Genesis 1:25, it says, and God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. But what about? And there is no what about. Because you see, in VidDevo Bible, we know that God did, God said, and God is. So because God said it, God gave it to us, and God reveals it to us, we stick with what God is doing. And as he has shown you, and as you have heard in your hearing the word of God, by the Spirit of God, to the people of God, about what God has done in creation, then you know, without a doubt, that in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 25, God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good, even as God has said, God has done. VidDevo Bible, 7 minutes in the Word of God.